Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Beautiful Bag. I am your host, Leanne Hayden, and this week I am bringing you Amalia, who also is known as the Ostomy dietitian on Instagram. And she's definitely got a story to tell. And one part that I love too, that her and I were just talking about, is she had met another person in an ostomy, Jessica, from listening to the podcast. So I want to talk about all those things. But Amelia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. So I'm Amalia. I'm going to say,
Amalia. Okay.
I usually don't correct people because Amelia is my Starbucks name. But it is a unique name. So there you go.
Love it.
Thank you for having me here. And yes, I just met with Jessica a few weeks ago, and we did this fabulous photo shoot together of my ostomy. And it was the most wonderful experience. And I have you to thank for that, really.
Well, you're very, very welcome for that. You know what, you're the one that listened to the podcast. You're the one that reached out to her. So congratulations to you for doing that, because a lot of people wouldn't take that into effect. Like they wouldn't say, hey, this person's right down the street from me, let me reach out to them. Maybe they want to be a part of something. So, and I apologize, Amalia.
Yeah.
I'm going to pronounce it right. I'm from Boston, so I have this accent that I'll drop A's and I'll forget vowels. So
Amazing. I went to school in Boston, so I get it.
So you get it. I love it. I love it. So why don't you share with everybody a little bit about your story? Because it's definitely a unique one, and I think it's important for them to hear.
Okay, yeah, let me share a little bit about how I got to the point where I got my ostomy. So I have an ileostomy. I had GI problems probably my whole life. I mean, I did, but nothing major. You know, as a child, I was like this child that my mom would send me to people's houses with a list of foods I couldn't eat. But that didn't faze anyone. Like she never took me to a doctor. She just said, okay, don't feed her these things. I'd have a vomiting or reflux or, whatever. And then when I was in college, I had an appendectomy, but that was for the most part the big things that I remember in my adolescence, childhood. But then in my early 20s, I started having a lot of GI symptoms. And I was with my husband now at the time. We were just engaged, and I just started actually my first job as a dietitian. This was 8 years ago. I was working clinical in an ICU with peds. Actually, my specialty was burn patients. It was a very high stress environment. And this is when my symptoms really took off. And I basically lived on the bathroom floor. I was passing mucus and blood and multiple bowel movements every single day. And no one really knew that this is what I was dealing with. My husband kind of knew at the time, but no one will really ever understand what that's like unless you've gone through it. And I was obviously advocating for myself in doctor's appointments, and I had tests done, but everything came back negative. I had sigmoidoscopy, I had endoscopy, and they just kept telling me this is all pelvic floor, rectal damage, but it escalated. And over the years, I had prolapse and fissures and fistulas, things that are not normal for just something, like pelvic floor weaknesses. So I lived that way, and I had to change my entire life to accommodate all of my symptoms. We left South Florida. I'm from Miami. My husband's Canadian. So we left South Florida after we got married. We decided we're going to live in Toronto. I don't know why a Miami girl thought that would be a good idea, but
welcome to the snow and the cold.
Yeah, we gave it a shot. I said, you know what? I did 5 years in Boston. I think I can hack this, but I couldn't hack it, but that's okay. So we went to Canada. I didn't work in the hospital because I was in the process of becoming dually licensed there as a dietitian. So I actually was working with a group of dietitians based out of Boston from Boston Children's. And that was my first introduction into GI nutrition. I worked with families who had kids with very severe food restrictions. And I loved it, but my condition got worse as we were living in Canada, and eventually I stopped working altogether. And I just had GI symptom after GI symptom. I felt like I was glued to my apartment. And when I went to a doctor in Canada, their healthcare system is totally different. They said, okay, you will get a call from a GI scheduling service in 6 months, which told me nothing because I don't, just getting a call doesn't mean I'm going to be scheduled. And that really scared me. And up to that point, it had already been several years of dealing with these same symptoms, and they were getting worse. The fistulas were worsening, the fissures were worsening, the amount of bowel movements I was having per day worsened. My husband and I traveled all over the country for alternate therapies. I did rectal Botox. I did it's physiotherapy to break up adhesions in your gut. I did that in St. Louis. We drove there. We did it in Virginia. We drove there. I was really trying to do everything they were telling me to do, but nothing was working. So at a certain point, and interrupt me if there's a question or anything.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, it just was too much. And we said, we're packing up and we're leaving Canada because I needed more specialized care. And so we decided, okay, we're going to take our time since they're telling me nothing is life threatening. We're going to take our time with it and kind of travel south, spend a little time traveling. My husband and I, we really needed a break. But during those few months, we were in DC. We spent a month there. In Philadelphia. I just got worse and was being admitted in the hospitals in those cities. It was interesting.
Wow. So, and all the different surgeons, all the different doctors, not surgeons, all the different doctors, all the different ERs appointments, all those different people that you saw, they weren't finding anything wrong at all.
They kept diagnosing me with a rectal issue. They were like looking at this one area because that is what would eventually send me to the ER with such extreme pain. They didn't investigate more, and to be honest, I don't think they were invested enough. Granted, I'm here visiting. That made sense in those locations where I was, but I knew I needed a more comprehensive evaluation. So one day I woke up, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I really couldn't live my life like this. It wasn't that I just couldn't live my life. If I'm completely honest with you on this podcast, I decided I couldn't live in that situation. I gave up working. My husband and I at that time were undergoing 3 years of infertility. At that same time, we were also being seen by an IVF clinic while we were in Canada. We had 3 failed rounds of IUI, 1 failed round of Clomid and letrozole, forgot about that. And it was just too much. I didn't have a job. I just didn't have a life. And I woke up one morning that we were traveling and I said, I'm leaving. I'm getting on a plane this week. I think it was the next day, and I'm flying to South Florida. I'm going home and I'm going to go find a doctor. I think my husband, he actually is an MD, and he works in healthcare investments. So he's not practicing. So he is very hands-on and understands, but he was in shock. He was just in complete shock.
Now, was he in shock because he didn't realize how much pain and stress and pressure you were in at the time? Because
100% didn't understand the toll it had taken on me mentally, forget even physically. I was rearranging my life to make all the symptoms of my illness, work with my life. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to spend 3 hours in the bathroom so that I could leave the house with him to do whatever we needed to do that day. He didn't know most of it. And that was my life. And he knew the other parts, right? Because it wasn't just the morning. Everything had a restriction. I was probably at that point, I could probably tolerate eating about 5 foods.
wow.
Like 5 different types of foods.
Wow.
And when you're doing that for years on end, and you get used to it, and you just are living with the bare minimum, your expectations are very, very low. Very low. And that sticks with you for life.
It does. It's amazing that things like that and the trauma on the body, like the book, the body keeps the score, right? The body knows what it's been through. Now, So you get on a plane, you're like, I'm done. I got to figure this out. Like, I can't do this anymore. So you go back to Florida.
I flew back to Florida. My mom's still living here, and I stayed with her. And I went to Cleveland Clinic, which is in Weston, Florida. And little did I know that one of the most well-renowned colorectal surgeons is there.
Mm.
I ended up in one surgeon's office. He might have been a GI, may not have been even a colorectal. I can't remember now. And he was, again, very focused on my rectum and just the damage there. He's like, we're going to do surgery. We're going to do this procedure. We're going to fix it. And I was like, something in me was like, no. I ended up during that time needing to go there because my large intestine basically just stopped working. And they had to actually eliminate for me everything that was being backed up. And they wanted to perform all these tests, but at that time, they actually were on back order for everything. They're like, we don't have the microscope endoscopy it's been a back order for 6 months, so you're gonna have to wait. And I am not waiting for any symptom relief. You're gonna fix me now. And so actually in 1 week, I ended up switching doctors, and they were like in shock because I wasn't referred to by any physician. I just showed up. This is the beauty of the American healthcare system that many people don't talk about. I was in Canada, couldn't even get a referral. And in America, within a day, I was kind of telling people what I want to happen and who I'm going to see. And they were like, who are you? And I came in guns hot. And I ended up with my surgeon, my colorectal surgeon. And I really owe him everything because he saw something in me that said, we're going to do this. We're going to create you a temporary ileostomy. And that's actually going to be the test. All these tests we want to order for you, they're not available. It's not fast enough. We're not doing it. This is the test. And we're going to see what happens. And for a surgeon to take a chance on me with someone who had no diagnosis, no chronic condition, no UC, no Crohn's, it was a big chance. And within a matter of 6 weeks of coming back to Florida from Canada, I was in my ileostomy. August 7th, I woke up, I had my ileostomy, and it was the first time I didn't have pain in 8 years. And despite the pain of surgery, I was like on cloud 9.
Wow. So how did that cloud 9?
Yeah.
Like, how did that feel? Like, were you just shocked that there was no pain? So there was no pain after that surgery, period?
I
Except
had
surgical
abdominal and rectal pain gone, zero, nothing. Literally nothing. Obviously, with the surgery, getting an ostomy surgery, there's many ups and downs. I was in the hospital for actually almost up to a month. I had to go back in. I had an G tube. It was a long recovery to get me to a stable place with the loop ileostomy. But as far as all the other pain I didn't even care about all those other things that were happening as a result of the ostomy per se. I was like, I don't care.
And this was about what, 5 years ago?
It was 5 years ago. This
5 years.
August, 5 years.
So now you have this temporary, you have this surgeon who's listening to you. What happens after that? Like, do you have a total colectomy now? Like, is it done?
What happened was, so my story didn't end there. Obviously, I'm so excited. I'm like, I want to live life. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Right. This is my personality always. For better or for worse, that's just my personality. It's probably what got me through all those years. And my husband and I, we wanted to pick off where we left off in terms of starting a family. And I say I don't even know if it was totally we, it was me totally driving that, because he's like, let's just
need a minute.
Yeah, take a minute. I was like, no, I'm good. I had 8 years of this. I'm ready. Having kids is so important to both of us. I come from a big family. He is very family oriented. If it was up to him, we'd probably have a football team. Right now we have 2 kids. But we'll see where it goes from there. But I wanted to continue pursuing that, and I wanted to work. I wanted to just leave the house and have a life. So a month after I had my surgery, I actually was readmitted for abdominal pain that was very confusing to me. It was on my birthday, September 7th, I'll never forget. And they did the test. I thought for sure maybe I had my first blockage, like something that I was experiencing that I didn't know what it could be, but it had to be related to the ostomy. And they're like, you're good. So they discharged me. They didn't find anything. They gave me some inflammatories. I went home. My husband took me out to a birthday dinner. I was like, okay, it passed. 2 weeks after that, to the day, I woke up with my first period ever at the age of 29. I never had a period ever my entire life. Another thing that was never investigated.
Wow.
And I did the math. It took me a while. I'm self-aware of my body, and I write certain things down, and I said, huh, that's weird. And I looked 2 weeks ago, I had this abdominal pain. It was probably ovulation pain.
Like cramps for the first time.
Right. But because this was new to me, it was like going through puberty at 29 years old. And as malnourished as I was at that point in my life, right, after 8 years of being malnourished and then just having your ostomy, those first 3 months, it's a very critical time in your nutrition and adjusting to dehydration, I still got a period. And that told me that whatever happened, whatever my surgeon did was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And it fixed something. Something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It definitely did. So we're done. We have a temporary ileostomy. You get your period for the first time. You know you want to have children. Wow, you've been through a lot. Without any real answers to why, but that's okay. Now you have 2 beautiful children. So something was working after. So now I'm assuming the doctor turned around and said, I'm assuming you decided, like, listen, this works. My body's better. Let's take out the colon. Let's close me up. Let me get on with my life.
A few bumps along the road. I developed diversion colitis. If you don't know what diversion colitis is, a lot of people listening may not. It's basically a result of you being diverted. So once you divert your ostomy, and nutrition is no longer entering the large intestine, the cells in your large intestine are kind of pissed off. And they're like, where's my nutrition? Because those cells get nutrition from food that you eat, right? And they ferment bacteria. And as a result, I developed a version of colitis. I developed it so severely and so quickly after my surgery. It was a little odd, in my opinion, and my surgeons. But their surgeons are kind of like, okay, you have diversion colitis. We treat that. They didn't really think too much of it because I was diverted. It was a loop, which meant that my large intestine was intact, still in my rectum. But in the middle of still pursuing fertility, the day actually my husband and I said, okay, I just had this ostomy surgery. We did 1 round of IVF. It was successful. I got 1 egg. We said, we're not going to chance my new body that's functioning to have a pregnancy. So we actually decided to pursue surrogacy. The very same day that we chose surrogate, that night I went home and I took a pregnancy test because I felt off. I was pregnant naturally. So the joke was on me. It was like, oh, you got colitis and now you're pregnant. You can't do anything about it.
Wow. Yeah.
There's a higher power that is using me as some kind of, I don't know, theater or something.
Yeah, something. Wow. So now, what was the reaction to both of you when you found out you were pregnant?
I think both my husband and I were relieved because I was so, like I said, I'm not used to all of the things that go along with having a normal menstrual cycle, like moodiness and just irritability and acting a different way.
And eating chocolate.
Yeah, all the things. And that's what triggered me to take a test because I was like, I don't feel like myself. My husband was keeping a distance from me those few days. And I was like, something is wrong. And I remember I came home from work. At that time, I went to work actually with my husband making photocopies. I did that for like 6 months. And it was the most fulfilling job I've ever had because it was the first job I had after not working for so long. We came home from this job together and I took this test and I threw it at him. I was like, I knew something was wrong. I'm not usually like this. And he was like, oh my God. And we didn't take a single moment of that for granted. Every second that I was pregnant, we didn't know if that was going to stay that way.
Right. Right.
Um, and so we just went with it. We just took it, moment by moment. And it turned out to be very successful. It was a very rough pregnancy because I had the diversion colitis. I think it acts similarly like a regular colitis, where sometimes 1/3 of patients will go into remission during pregnancy, 1/3 will kind of stay the same, and 1/3 of patients will improve.
Mhm.
So mine worsened dramatically. And I didn't even know how bad it was until I actually delivered, and then it got even worse. And my son was born January 2020. So right around the corner was beautiful COVID, and the whole world shut down. And initially they're like, you're not a priority. I also had this beautiful newborn.
Mhm.
And my memories of those few months, other than just it being myself and my husband and my son at home, we couldn't have guests. We were being very distant, first time parents with COVID.
Mhm.
And it was beautiful, but my memories, a lot of them are just me and him on the toilet. Like I was nursing my son on the toilet. So not only am I going through my ostomy, but I'm having this severe losing a lot of blood and mucus out of my rectum. And that is what the diversion colitis will do.
Okay.
And
So
I
it's
said,
basically, is it basically killing off your large intestine? Like your large intestine's just dying?
yes, it's dying. The treatment for diversion colitis are enemas that you place through your stoma, providing it essential fatty acids.
Okay.
So they tried this with me during pregnancy. Now imagine this woman on a bathroom floor alone with a catheter, a big belly, through a stoma. Like, why? I don't have the rights to be doing this. Forget that I'm a dietitian. That doesn't make me a nurse and
Right.
just a human who's never done this. Trying to put a catheter through my stoma, putting in this essential fatty acid formula that may or may not work. It was not working. And it was just interesting that this is what a doctor thought would be an appropriate intervention for any human.
So this wasn't the surgeon that created the ileostomy. This was a separate doctor.
No, it is a surgeon's team. They kind of
Okay.
I actually never established myself with a GI until recently. My colorectal surgeon followed me. But they were doing the best they can. Once you're pregnant with an ostomy,
Yeah.
they don't want to touch you or look at you.
Right.
The Cleveland Clinic here does not actually do any OB. So I was seen at a different hospital entirely for my pregnancy, unless it was specifically colorectally involved. I would go there, they prescribe this enema, and then they're like, we can't touch you.
Until you have the baby. So now you have your beautiful son. COVID's about to hit.
Yeah.
You're
I
healing
had
from
the
the
colitis.
pregnancy. You have colitis. So now what happens?
So I knew I wanted to proceed with a total proctocolectomy, which
Mhm.
again, it seems like a very extreme procedure to have without even a diagnosis, when technically they could reconnect me and then try to reevaluate me. I was never going back. I knew from the moment I woke up with my ostomy the year prior, or a year and a half prior, that was never going to happen. So I couldn't live with the diversion colitis. I wanted to take it out and move on with my life.
Mhm.
Many lessons I learned throughout my ostomy journey were that there's never a moment where you're really moving on from having an ostomy. Having an ostomy in itself is going to give you different symptoms, different scenarios that you are going to end up back in the hospital. It's just a fact. And
Mhm.
I had to be reminded of that time and time again.
Right.
And no matter how bad it's gotten, I still wouldn't choose to go back to my life prior. And it's gotten to bad places.
Right.
So I have my newborn. Eventually I get in for surgery. He was about 4 months. So it was about 4 or 5 months postpartum. And I go in for my total proctocolectomy alone, was dropped off at the hospital doorsteps. That is a surgery I never, ever, ever want to relive, ever. It was much harder than getting the ostomy. Nothing to do with the ostomy, but taking out the rectum and getting a Barbie butt is the most painful thing I've ever experienced, I'd rather have 5 more kids than ever. I'll have 1,000 more children than ever do that.
Yeah, you can't say, it's not like you can sit on a donut and let it heal. You've got to sit sideways. You have to be really careful. You can't do
I
that.
came out with a catheter. I couldn't urinate by myself for over a month. I had to self-cath. And I think, pain is very much in your, as much as it is physical, it's associated with all the things that go along with your life at that time. Being alone in a hospital. Imagine trying to get help when you cannot move after that surgery and you have any reason for needing a nurse and you're alone.
Right.
And nurses don't want to be around patients at that time during
not
COVID.
that.
They were like very minimally involved. And then being separated from my son, which were really the pivotal moments in my health journey, were the fact that my kids happened at the same time, which I think pulled me through, but also made every moment that I was separated from them make the physical manifestation feel a million times worse.
You're probably right. Because it's a lot, the physio and the mental, they go hand in hand, right? And they always talk about that gut-mind connection, all of it. And I can't imagine being separated from my baby who is 5 months old and being in a hospital through COVID to get this procedure done. And how long were you in the hospital?
I actually, for the proctocolectomy, it was probably like a week plus, maybe 10 days. But it was an at-home recovery, which was really long.
Right.
And then the back and forth of working out the whole bladder situation, which a lot of people don't talk about. It. I actually shared something about this on my Instagram yesterday because I've seen a large push by Coloplast with regard to their self-catheters.
Yep.
A lot of people don't talk about this, but when you have your large intestine removed, you're removing a supporting structure and all your organs are going to shift. Your female organs, your bladder, they're going to tilt and they're going to shift. And that was never mentioned to me before the surgery. A lot of women I've spoken to have said they were given no warning. And that will affect how you menstruate, how things pool inside of you, and it will affect how you go to the bathroom. I still cannot urinate exactly in the same way I did prior to. Like, I can't just sit down on the toilet and it comes out passively. It's complicated a little bit, and that's because of the way I think my bladder tilted back.
Right.
After the procedure.
Right. And they don't talk about that because, again, even if they take part of your colon or all of your colon, things are going to fall. Again, like you said, there's a supporting structure. There's parts of your body that were there. The rest of your body doesn't know how to handle it, and they'll readjust, they'll move around. So we have the surgery, you finally get through your, your colectomy, and you have a newborn, you're home.
Yeah.
How is it now? Once you get through all the...
I'm so happy. I'm cruising with my babe. It's just us. We're living in this COVID bliss where my husband is like, not many people who are working full time get to stay at home forever. At this point, you think it's forever. So of course and I'm like, okay, what's next? I want another baby. And I'm not going to wait for another 5-year miracle.
Right. Okay.
So my husband is like, okay, whatever you want. And I had this egg that we had retrieved during our only round of IVF. And at that time when I did IVF, they said, you need to do more rounds. Anyone who's been through fertility treatments kind of knows the game of these clinics. I have the most amazing doctor. But that's just they want to save you from having to do it multiple times. So they're like, let's get more eggs. But I said, no, I'm not doing that again. I've been through a lot. I'm so grateful that I have my son. I have this egg. We're going to try it. But if it doesn't work, I'm okay. I'm good at this point in my life. I'm putting myself under any more treatments and hormones, whatever. So we go in, we do the transfer. On my son's first birthday, I got my first positive pregnancy test.
Oh, yay.
That was my second son. So my boys, I've got 2 boys. They're 18 months apart. I don't think we ever thought that would happen. But a blessing. Everyone tells me that we have twins, but we did it the hard way.
Yeah.
Because they're like so close, but they're not. So it's hectic at all. And that pregnancy was very, very hard with my ostomy. I still, interestingly enough, my surgeon didn't, when he did my proctocolectomy, he left me with a loop style stoma. So they will do this. Well, they'll leave the loop, meaning that there's two holes, but really at the behind one hole, it's an end. So it's not, there's nothing connecting, right? Because I no longer have a large intestine. So that's kind of what I dealt with. I had during my pregnancy. It was a hard pregnancy. I had blockages. I got really cool images of my son because they had to do MRIs, which they don't traditionally do while you're pregnant. Those images of my son inside of me like are so cool. I put them in his baby book. And he came premature. He was 34 weeks. Yeah. So he was a NICU baby, and that was very challenging for me. Like I said, every notable hard moment in my life has always been dictated by moments where I've been separated from my children. Despite everything I had endured, the worst moment I would say in my entire life was going home without my baby when he stayed in the NICU. But I was overall very, very grateful because he was just a grower and feeder, which means he had no issues breathing. He just needed to be fed. One funny bit in this story is that I produce, with everything my body doesn't do right, it produces a lot of breast milk. So this is one funny thing. And to be a person with an ostomy who's challenged with hydration, I don't understand this. So I told myself, with the struggles I dealt with my first son, trying to stop milk production prior to my proctocolectomy, I said, I'm not going through that again. So it either is going to be a smooth transition or we're just going to use formula. But given my knowledge as a dietitian and working in pediatrics, the day that my son was born, that my water broke, I was going into my toddler's room to pick him up out of the crib. I picked him up out of the crib and there it goes. But my water breaks. He looks at me, he goes, Mama, pee-pee. What are you doing? Go to the bathroom. And it was my husband's birthday. They're born on the same day. And I go into his room and I tell him, hey, how would you like to have a son on your birthday? He thinks I'm joking. But that moment that it happened, I knew that I was like, I'm going to be on this long haul with breastfeeding, or at least pumping milk, because breast milk in a preemie is 1,000 times more important than a full-term baby, because they're at higher risk of developing GI conditions. And so I just knew, I was like, okay, throw the pumps in the car, we're going to the hospital. That's literally what I said to my husband. And he came and I pumped breast milk, and I actually had a very different experience this time with my second son. Because I had to stop nursing with my older son, I really wanted to try. It was important for me, just personally, to see how long I could do it. Just like with being pregnant, I didn't take it for granted. I didn't take that gift for granted either. I actually donated breast milk for 18 months and I fed the neighbor's baby because I produced so much milk. But every single day that I was able to produce milk was, to me, like a gift. It was, and I didn't, like I said, didn't take that for granted. But it also, this gift of producing milk saved me, because after I gave birth to my son, he was by C-section, my second one. I was hospitalized for about a month with issues with my ostomy that really came out of left field. And this is referring back to when I said, you think everything's good, right? You're like, okay, they took out the colon. I have no chronic condition. Like, I should be good. The baby's out. Yep. Like, why am I now having issues? And now my son was 2 or 3 months old and he was a preemie. Anytime I was separated from him, till this day, really, actually, it feels like that same day I had to leave the hospital with him. It's a feeling that it's a memory imprinted in your brain that never goes away. So it was really hard. And I thought at the time I was catching viruses from my older son who's in preschool. But I was taken by ambulance several times. They couldn't figure out what was going on. They realized that I had scar tissue built up and needed to have a revision of my ostomy. Again, another surgery with a baby at home. And I was devastated. But every time I went to that hospital, even when I was picked up by ambulance, you know what came with me? The pump.
Baby. Oh, the pump. The pump.
Yeah. And people started to know me had readmissions. I even at one point lent my pump to one of the nurses who forgot some of her tubing at home. And people started to know me as the girl comes and pumps gallons of breast milk during her hospital stay.
Yep.
But just being able to do that really helped keep me connected to my son at home. And also there's like this hormonal component. Every time you breastfeed, there are very good happy hormones and dopamine happening in your brain that really help you.
Right.
So I had the surgery. It went really well. They turned my loop into a proper end. And that was my very last surgery with my ostomy. That was in December 2021. And I haven't had a surgery since, which for me is like a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I'm sitting here crossing fingers here. So now you have your two sons. They're what, two and three now, 2 and 4?
Yeah, 2 and 3.
2 and 3 years old. And now you're starting to show up on social media because you've just started showing up on social media, like brand new at it. Well, I don't know at it, but brand new out there. And you're starting to share your story and your journey. And you just did a photo shoot with Jessica with your ostomy. And now you're starting to work as an ostomy dietitian.
Yes.
So and that's important because there's so many of us that don't know, can we eat this? Can we not eat this? And again, everybody's so different. Some people I just had broccoli. I'm totally fine. It was cooked. It wasn't raw, but still a lot of people can't touch it. Everybody's bodies are just so different. So what are you doing now? You know, you're raising your 2 children, you're getting back into the dietitian role. What are you doing now with all of it?
So I want to say that I'm really grateful that I even have the opportunity to go back to work, even if it's for a few hours each day, because I never thought I'd get back to this point. Physically to be able to do it, and mentally to bring myself back into the healthcare world, being a patient for so long. I felt this pull inside of me for a very long time that I need to work with this population as a dietitian. The resources are just not there. I witnessed it firsthand as a patient myself, and as a continually as a patient to not having any nutrition support. And I can't even explain what it feels like inside to be drawn to working with this population. It's not even a choice. It's something I have to do and want to do. And the way I explain it is, you know, some dietitians, you'll pick a niche and it's something that interests you, but you may become disinterested in it or, you know, whatever. I live and breathe this every single day. It's never leaving, right? I have an ileostomy for life. So I'm continually learning myself, but I'm continually invested in this population. So yeah, you got it right the first time. I am brand new to social media. It's interesting. I've now been on, I think, like about a month, maybe a little longer than that. It's an interesting world to now dip my toes into. It's a private practice and I'm doing it, you know, on my own. So it's putting myself out there in many different ways. But it's amazing that, you know, even when I just started this account, call myself the Ostomy Dietitian, that's my handle. Immediately, people were following me. I don't know how they found me. I was doing no following, networking, or I was just there to observe. What is this new Instagram? To me, new. And it was amazing to see. And I would click on every single profile that came in to follow me to see, why are they following me? What do they have? Obviously, there's a huge trend in IBD. You know, to have Crohn's or colitis. A lot of people are following me that have IBD and an ostomy. A lot of them are following me without even an ostomy because they know that probably they know one day they may end up with one and they want to learn. And then of course, for support. So these are the populations that I want to work with. But, you know, IBD aside, we were talking a little bit earlier before we started the podcast that having a stoma in itself is this huge topic to address in nutrition. Aside from all the other chronic conditions, you could just be someone with a stoma and you can have diabetes. You could be someone with a stoma and be pregnant. You could be someone with a stoma who wants to gain weight after having your surgery. There can be a million different nutrition related reasons why you would see a dietitian. But the fact of the matter is, If you have an ostomy, that in itself is an area to address with regards to what you're putting in your mouth. And you have to take into consideration that huge elephant in the room if you want to even address those other chronic conditions. And I think that's what I bring to the table with the clients that I work with, is that I have one myself and I understand, and that's probably 90% of the battle.
That is 90% of the battle. Because again, like you said, people are coming to you for all different, you know, they're coming to dietitians for different reasons, but there is a need for us in the actual ostomy world with having our stomas. And you did a post the other day, like each stoma is different. It's the design of your stoma can be different for what you can eat and fuel yourself with too. So that is so important. And I'm so glad that you're out there to do that. And for all of you listening, you can go follow her at the Ostomy Dietitian, where you can just go follow her. If you have questions about nutrition and all of that, reach out to Amalia for that as well. I almost did it again. My brain was like, Amalia again. And, you know, Amalia, if you were to leave, your story is so interesting. But if you were to leave our listeners with just one thing, what would that one thing be?
It would be to never stop advocating for yourself and push as much as you need to, because I'm still a person with an ostomy without a diagnosis. And I don't interact with many people or talk to people through support groups that are in that similar situation. And I had to fight for myself every step of the way to get to the point where I can live the life I want to live. And I'm, you know, my expectations are very low in my life. It takes very little for me to be happy because of everything I went through. And a lot of people with chronic conditions will feel very similarly. But you can get there. You have to advocate for yourself. And if you feel like you need help from somebody else, just start talking to people. That is what this wonderful platform that you have, Leanne, that you've created, Instagram, Facebook, there's so many support groups. It's all about building our community.
It really is. And we were talking earlier about getting together and community does mean a lot. It really does. It makes you feel like you're not alone. And there's something to be said about being around somebody who's in an ostomy as well, where you can just sit down and have dinner together and talk about poop. I mean, you literally can talk about the things that you would never talk about with anybody else, but you can talk about them with other people that understand you. So Amalia, I am so grateful and so thankful for you for coming on the show today and sharing your journey and sharing the struggles that you went through and going through an ostomy, getting pregnant, being in, you know, going through it during COVID, all the stuff that you've been through over the last, gosh, well, more than 5 years, but the last, for half your life anyway, I'm assuming, right? Close to it. You know, thank you again so much for being here with us today. And guys, again, go follow her on Instagram at the Ostomy Dietitian. I'm going to say that again, the Ostomy Dietitian. We're not going to have anybody else on Instagram with that handle.
That's true. Thank you so much for having me, Leanne.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome.